Welcome. Good morning. So I think I have 15 minutes, is that right? Okay, wonderful. So, yeah, that's great. So I want to talk about high-intensity urban order, and it's interesting that the kind of neat and crisp orders you've been showing have been totally swamped in the contemporary conditions. So I will talk about this paradox of homogenization via too much difference. So we're talking about mega cities and the way they're starting to appear like what I call garbage spills around the world, with lack of identity. Even if there are real differences around the world, they all end up looking the same, and that's something we all suffer from. I will end up the talk with a vision of how we can generate density and bring them under a sense of complex order. So we have to first understand what drives contemporary urban concentration, because we have the urban renaissance where we had in mid-20th century we've been spreading out into the suburbs, and now we're pulling back together. And I think that has to do with the socioeconomic transformation from what has been called Fordism to post-Fordism, kind of network society where we all come together in R&D, marketing, finance, to bring out new products and new services all the time. And this was the era of Fordism, mechanical mass reproduction, which had then very orderly cities with different zones separating out and rolling out and distributing the business district, the residential districts, the industry district. And Brasilia is an example of that, which at the same time has a kind of overall government center. It's very, very spacious, very, very distributed. But this model of, which included the garden city, spreading out, kind of didn't succeed and was delivering a lot of prosperity, but couldn't, I think, deliver the current level of productivity and prosperity. So we're moving from kind of order of repetition and order of kind of nearly violent agglomeration. So this also has a lot to do with the reintroduction of market processes driving urbanization. And this intensification of agglomeration economies. We all feel in our bones that we have to come to these centers to be productive, to be part of a productive process. And this is the outcome of this, where the city of London looks like now through a process. There's a lot of planners trying to put their hands into this pie, but if you look at it, you realize this couldn't have been planned and wasn't planned. But this is an image of big cities all over the world, and indiscriminate nearly. And it poses a challenge to navigation, and we're clinging to sometimes to these kind of icons and iconic landmark buildings to have a certain sense of identity to a place, but also to navigate a city. And we've come up with quite a few of those. And sometimes they work, but in a sense it's hopeless to have a few icons delivering order and identity into the city. Yes, sometimes we are lucky, like in our tower in Marseille, if it's the only landmark, it works as a landmark. But, or in our Miami tower, it maybe pulls apart and you have a cluster. But as they accumulate and agglomerate, they cancel each other out and you get some kind of menacing spill. So the recognition of figures gets kind of blunted and blurred. And these are the kind of conditions we're seeing now. This is Moscow City. What is interesting here, the desire for density and to pack it in, but also you can't guess what's coming around the corner. So there's a kind of disorientation potential. And this image I do like because that's Tokyo, and there's a lot of similarity to the garbage spill. So when I look at the city, I think you look at this huge spill, the only thing which gives order, identity, recognizability, certain rhythm and pulse, a shape to the city is actually the river, or maybe a valley, a mountain, natural features. So, and I think that should tell us something. And you find that in different cities. Thank God they have have features like rivers and mountains. But we can maybe generalize with them. The river, the way it moves through a topography, that has logic. It finds the path of least resistance. It traces and amplifies the topography. And maybe built environment could do something similar. It could also become more complex. Rivers used to be like this rather than simple channels. And this is a vision where we can imagine an urbanism which follows the flow, which maybe has rhythm, which doesn't impose a uniform, for instance, density, but has different directionalities, densities, grains, etc. And this is initial sketches, what we do under the heading of parametric urbanism. But I don't think this means to be planned. What I'm arguing for, that this could be an emergent order with multiple and many authors and interventions and developers with their various architects come together, like a multi-species ecology. So that would be my metaphor. These things arrange themselves and self-organize according to the various needs and some kind of symbiotic correlations. And it's a differentiated environment which animals can navigate, and they're much more dumb than we are. So we would be, and humans can navigate such scenes, and maybe urban scenes could be navigated if they were ordered according to rules and principles. And I think that's at the moment prevented by two things: by planners putting rigid impositions, and second, by a kind of discipline and disarray, which is a kind of splintered in a plurality of methodologies and should be unified under kind of the methodologies of parametrism, which allows this to happen even with multiple authors coming together. These are the studies we've been doing and you can integrate, it's not tabula rasa, you integrate in not only into topography with respect to features, but also to existing settlement structures. You pick up their grain, their lines, and amplify them. And again, I love these comparisons. And you know, of course, the interventions we've done so far are only drops in the ocean of urban chaos. This is our project in Seoul, and you see that the degrees of freedom we have now under parametrism allows us to blend and fit into very complex, irregular sites, pick up various levels, connections, integrate also parkscapes and build form. We can also calm down the complexity and accentuate only primary features, shapes of spaces and entrance points, etc. So I think something like this becomes relatively complex. There are multiple institutions integrated and many entrances and exits, but I think it's a relatively easy navigable space. Similar, trying to do a tower integrated with the conferencing center and trying to articulate variety and navigation and the way things interlink and interlock, and the way we envisage larger structures. So it's not repetition, there's a rhythm, there's a pulse, there's a valley form, and various functions coming together. And this is an experiment with students where 12 different students, individual projects are developed in parallel, with resonating with each other, having there's a stylistic unity, but also there's a lot of difference in terms of tectonic systems, in terms of detail, in terms of institution. So there's a lot of variety, but it all comes together nicely because there's the ethos of resonating, of finding continuities creatively, unpredictably. And these are scripted urban formations where you have rule-based impositions of the roads, the various types, and they're settled according to rules of differentiation. So this is my vision, and some of our projects, the way we see urban density to emerge is the three-dimensional interface of communication where you're surrounded by offerings, urban offerings, above, below, all around in layers. And these, I think, quite intense conditions. If you have towers, we want to have atriums, step-out positions. You can slip through underneath, like the Leadenhall Tower as well. So to have urban porosity, to have variation, and again, this project is, I think, a signal project where you have these connections and the three-dimensional sensation of being in an urban density, but it's not chaotic, it's not menacing. You can be orienting and navigate along curves. You have convex, concave, distinguishing volume and void, etc. So I think this is a successful example of something we can envisage. This is just one element, and you can imagine other authors coming in, adding layers, building it out, attaching to this in the spirit of a convergent discipline which can make this happen, and entrepreneurs being free to program and reprogram synergies in such an environment. And of course, there's a settling of various shops into this very, very porous, transparent, with multiple atria. I think the idea of the atrium, urban atrium, is very important for us, that the urbanism, the public space, the interfacing between different institutions happens not only in the streets, but internally as well. Some kind of idea of an internal urbanism. And really you can gather and have interaction with multiple and many audiences, small events, large events, and a continuous flow of gathering and regathering in this 24/7 networking society. So these are the kind of spaces we love, where you have vistas connecting across multiple spaces, including the exterior. This is an office space where we've developed this, different atria. Also, the towers will have environmentally calibrated facades, so you would be, this style allows regional adaptation to conditions. This is shading becoming major feature, as well as navigation voids. So the tower looks quite different from different sides, and that's orienting. But there are many different ways towers could recognize climatic conditions, but they would be unified by such adaptations. And this is the way we like to have continuity from horizontal to vertical navigation. It's all about orienting in a complex environment. And some of our recent towers, the emphasis now in this part of the lecture is three-dimensional connectivity across towers, rather than having a core cutting off and the connections on the floor. It's also would cut across opening up connections across floors as well as opening up vistas continuously into the exterior. So it becomes a much more dynamic, much more empowering experience where you navigate through something, and many offerings are visible and at play. And also in the exterior you sense where's public spaces, there's a top public space, there's interim public spaces, there's a ground lobby, of course, connecting into a podium. And so this has been a feature and theme of some of our projects, with these kind of grand atria looking up and down the tower, but also looking across to other towers and maybe having connections across. And some of these are getting built. So this is getting built at the moment in Beijing. It's the first one. It's a multi-tenant office building with a series of sky lobbies coming through, and this kind of Grand Canyon connecting up. As a navigation space, you step out and you see who is there, who's not there, where might be something. These are also mixed use, so people will advertise in their internal facade the various offices and points of reference they have. This is under construction right now, and I want to show finally some visions for even larger atria. This was a mega atrium we conceived for Hyundai to take two very tall twin tower in a much lower but much more compact, large concept, where you literally have all the departments and thousands of people looking at each other. It's all about inter-awareness, inter-visibility, and having these bridges to make connections to display public events that might be relevant for many people. So we won this competition for a multi-company conglomerate, Taikang in Wuhan, where we're working on this and trying to realize this kind of concept at the moment, I think. But again, for me, this is just a microcosm representing an overall city condition. But imagine buildings being conceived like cities in themselves in this fashion. So I'm just clicking through that. I think I'm reaching my end. You can have events and art events and others changing. You can have various ways of making that a public event, which radiates out through the city. But that might put my proposition for an intensity of new urban order, which is navigable and less menacing, and creates identities in various places.
Patrik,
thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely wowed by your
15
slides.
minutes.
15 minutes, exactly.